Hello and welcome to Access Chat. I'm delighted that we're joined today by Megan Smith. Megan is the Global Accommodations and People Accessibility Lead within Amazonian Experiences and Technology. Now, that's quite a long job title. Amazon is an enormous employer. It has 1.5 million-ish employees around the globe. So this is a big, chunky role. So, Megan, welcome to Access Chat. It's great to have you on. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and about how you came to be working in the accessibility space? And then we'll go on to talk about what you do in your role as the accommodations lead within
Yeah,
Amazon.
happy to. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and chat with you. A little bit about me. So I've been with Amazon almost 8 years, almost double digits, and I joined to start what has become people accessibility, which is a part of my scope still today. I got into the field of disability and inclusion and accessibility somewhat on accident. I'm legally blind. I have a progressive retinal disease, and I got my first guide dog when I was 17. And that is a very character building experience and age to get a guide dog, I learned. And so I was kind of thrust into self advocacy and kind of just became really interested and passionate about, you know, ensuring that people had what they needed, that we were thinking through kind of where disparate impact or where adverse treatment of people with disabilities was kind of evident around me. I was working in healthcare at the time, and it was not lost on me that kind of everyone is at some sort of disadvantage in a hospital. And then when you have a disability, that can become compounding. And so got really interested then. And it's a super long story, but ultimately recognized that I didn't want to just have my lived experience to stand on, but I wanted to understand kind of disability more broadly. And so I got a graduate degree in disability services and ultimately began working for a health insurance company in kind of the broader diversity space. The very first thing that I did there was get laid off and wrote a note to the CEO that basically said, I understand your mental model around diversity. His point back then was it shouldn't be one team's job, it should be everyone's job. And so I said, I hear you, but you just hired me as a diversity analyst. Here's what I'm seeing. And through that conversation, he said, I'm not sure what role you're going to have, but you will be here doing important work and influencing my leadership team. And so was able to work with the C-suite for several years at that company. And often as my role progressed, I moved into broader customer experience. And often as we were talking about customer experience and what we should aspire to, companies like Amazon were heavily referenced. And I was actually well connected with Disability In, and through them kind of learned that Amazon was hiring for this role, and it happened. So that's how I got here.
Fantastic. And I know that Amazon is customer obsessed, but the employees are the internal customers. And that means you've got a pretty large customer base to serve across all different parts of the globe. So what are some of the things that you do in your role to support Amazonians in the wide variety of different roles? Because Amazon is enormous. You've got so many different types of companies, so many technologies. You've got a range of things from, your fulfillment centers to your logistics network to people that are coding and planning and wanting to design drone-based deliveries and satellite networks and da, 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 da. So there's a huge diversity of people and roles and so on. So how do you then deliver disability inclusion to that wide client base of internal customers?
Yeah, I would say the breadth of roles that we have and kind of how we build things make this role really, really interesting. And so just to kind of sort through what's in my scope, I'm accountable for accommodations case management. So as soon as you recognize that you need an adjustment to when, how, or where you work, my team handles kind of the discovery of that, the intake, the evaluation. We work with your site or your manager to get to a decision, and then we help ensure that that accommodation is implemented. It's kind of that end-to-end accommodation process. And we do that for medical, religious, and statutory requirements for flexibility. And so it extends a bit beyond medical. Then we are accountable for direct delivery of accommodation services. And so you mentioned, 1.x million employees. We have a lot of employees who are blind or who are deaf or who are neurodiverse and rely on human services on assistive technology. And so my team is accountable for delivering those services, whether that's an interpreter, whether that's a screen reader. We make sure that we have the services and that we're deploying them at scale for Amazon. So that's another part of my organization. And then I kind of close out that flywheel by being accountable for people accessibility. So my team is we don't write the code for products that Amazonians use, but we set the standard and offer services and tooling to ensure that what we build and what we buy for Amazonians is accessible. And so I think about it as people accessibility. Our job is to help prevent a barrier from existing in the first place. And an accommodation is if a barrier does exist, we remove that barrier for the employee. We learn from those accommodations, and that informs what we focus on in accessibility. And so not directly accountable for disability inclusion, but certainly a part of that broader landscape at Amazon that's working to ensure that people with disabilities are able to deliver and delight our customers in a lot of the many ways that you described.
Megan, welcome to the show. As Neil said, I do understand that Amazon is customer obsessed, and I don't know what I would have done. I don't know what we would have done here in the United States without Amazon during COVID, because y'all were such a blessing to the community during that time. I know that a lot of the employees are in the United States, but you still have a ton of employees outside, all over the world. And I know some people call accommodations adaptions in other, areas, but it just feels like I'm curious about things like I know that in the past, people to get an accommodation, they needed a doctor's note and things like that. And I just, in my mind, I think you have such a big, important job. And I just am wondering, how could you possibly get your hands around such a big job? I'm very grateful that you're doing it. I'm also really grateful for what you said about the CEO before, because most of us will be like, fine, we'll just leave. But you took the time to say, wow, you were missing such an opportunity here. So I wanted to applaud you for that bravery too. But you have a really, really big job. And I was just wondering how that works.
Yeah, thank you. He described me as having chutzpah, and it's something I've tried to carry, these last 20 years with me as like a core trait that I make sure I don't compromise much on. Yeah, it's, the breadth that Neil mentioned and then the scale that you mentioned, right? And kind of the cultural norms, the systemic opportunities or lack thereof, it all interplays with how we deliver accommodations. Accessibility, I think we benefit from the fact that a lot of what we do at Amazon is global kind of by design. And so that's a bit easier to handle. But accommodations, they can be very local. And so we have a team of, I'm not going to quote numbers, but we have a large team and we build technology and products that help support us delivering these kinds of accommodations at scale. The team has undergone an incredible transformation lately. They started it a year and a half ago, and it's just proven to be a really strong model for the way that we work. I mentioned we do kind of a broad swath of accommodation. So if you need an adjustment, we are likely where you go at Amazon. And so a large portion of our volume is people who got hurt over the weekend or who've had that nagging back pain forever. And right, it's a temporary, maybe musculoskeletal, and they just need some time to be able to work a little bit differently until they're 100%. And so this kind of temporary category is actually a lot of what we do. And those accommodations need to happen fast. They have a lot in common in terms of how we work through them. And so we have a really tight kind of milestone model that we run those through, where we've got experts that kind of understand each step of the process and get employees from I need help to I'm working with my accommodations really quickly. Then another big bucket that we cover is pregnancy related accommodations. And so we ensure that we understand the rights of pregnant workers, the experience in this kind of critical moment in an employee's life. And we make sure that we're delivering accommodations for them, whether that's additional breaks, maybe for lactation or maybe, lifting restrictions. We make sure that we're delivering that. And so that kind of comes through its own separate path. And then we have employees who have more complex disabilities, ones like mine, right? And so for that, we have a high touch accommodation team. And so this is where we've really developed keen expertise in what it's like, not just to kind of have these disabilities in common accommodations, but what does that look like in an AR sortable building or in a corporate building or in a delivery station? And so the team really works to understand the ways in which we work at Amazon and how that shows up with various disabilities and curates accommodations for that. And then they're there in that kind of relationship with the employee to help them as their needs may change. That's an area I want to continue to improve upon, right? Like we're all kind of in this continuum of disability and our ability to support people as their disability evolves, or if you've never had a disability and it's new to you, right? And so that's really kind of a next stage in our journey that I'm excited to unlock, is kind of how we maintain that relationship with our employees.
Megan, I know that you brought up so many powerful points, and I just want to say that one thing that when I was learning all of this, one thing that was talking about a lot would be the temporary ones, because people didn't really understand it. They would get afraid when I was talking about maybe somebody with a permanent disability, but I think people understood that temporary a little bit better. So I just wanted to applaud your answer. I'm very impressed. Over to Antonio.
So welcome, Megan. So you are working in this space for quite some time. You're working in different companies. Do you feel today that you still need to explain the true value of disability and inclusion? If yes, how do you get the buy-in from leaders that might not understand it?
Yeah, I love this question. And anyone that I've ever interviewed for Amazon for a role related to this has heard this from me. Not to say anything negative or even neutral about any previous company. What I will say is true about Amazon, though, is that this is not a place where I feel like I need to defend the why. You mentioned customer obsession. That's one of our leadership principles. We have many others. And so many of them, probably all of them, if I really took time to go through them, map back to the business case for disability. So we have one, for example, insist on the highest standards. Something I'll pull out of that is that we never send a defect down the line. And for anyone who's talked about shift left and accessibility, that is the definition of insist on highest standards. And so I need accessibility so that I can avoid the need for an accommodation that's working around a barrier that should have never been there in the first place. Right. So that's just one example. Customer obsession is another easy, obvious one. We cannot deliver in the way that we do for our customers without a workforce that understands, is committed to working backwards from those customers, and that holds a high bar. And so I need to be able to ensure that those Amazonians who are bar raising by definition of our hiring practice can actually do their jobs. It's my job to get all of those barriers out of the way so that we can unlock them to deliver for our customers. I'll say another, invent and simplify. This has been a really fun conversation as we've been talking about artificial intelligence across all of the ways that Amazon may use it. And there are so many proof points where individuals with disabilities, the one I've been talking about lately is screen reader users, right? And so we see kind of this shift for people who are predominantly blind, low vision using screen readers, where as this technology emerged, adoption was really low. It hovered around, single digits and then started to creep into double digits. Once it started to hit close to 20%, it skyrocketed. And that was a new kind of interaction model. And what I've learned is that as this adoption was happening, studies would show that kind of blind screen reader users actually had changes in their neural networks, changes in the way they processed speech. And so for those of you that have engaged with someone who's a screen reader user, they're listening to that screen reader 2, 3, 4x what someone who is not a screen reader user is. Those of you that might listen to a podcast, you're probably not listening at 1x, or you might not be listening at 1x. It might be 1.25, 1.5, maybe 2.x if you're like an active consumer of audio. But what does that tell us about kind of the way that we're all engaging with technology 2 years from now, 5 years from now? And how much will that personalization matter? And I think that in this example, blind people who use screen readers are a good leading indicator of what we can expect. Captions are another example. And so I think we just have all of these opportunities to learn from people who have been inventing their way around barriers for a world that wasn't designed for them. And instead of pointing that learning backwards, what would we do different for disabled people? We can point it forward and say, what have disabled people taught us that will matter to everyone going forward? And so that's another great example of invent and simplify. Again, I could go through every leadership principle. And so here it's not what should we, it's how do we? How do we do it at our breadth? How do we do it at our scale? How do we do it in a way that meaningfully improves the lives of Amazonians. And so, Antonio, to answer your question, it's not part of the story here. And I'm really grateful for that, because then I get to spend, and my team gets to spend our time on actually doing the work instead of convincing leaders that the work is important.
Megan, I'm really impressed because, to be honest, I think our community doesn't understand the kind of depth that's happening in Amazon. So first of all, I'm very impressed with what I'm hearing, because I think a lot of us feel that we've lost so much during the attack on the DEI that, yeah, somebody started. But I'm very impressed with what you're saying, because it's the only way forward. So first of all, thank y'all for the leadership. I know that obviously Amazon's very involved in AI, and I'm a little tiny point in that I'm one of your beta testers, and I'm always giving my Alexa a really hard time. I shouldn't say that word, but it's also fun training it and learning it and watching y'all grow. It's just very interesting times. But I'm also hopeful that AI has the ability to really reduce some of the gaps that we see for people with disabilities. And so I was curious, how is AI helping, confusing? I mean, I know it's changing everything, so it's a really big question, but I was just curious, is it helping right now, what you are doing?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, and one that doesn't have an answer just yet, Deborah, except the foregone conclusion that, like, yes, with a ton of great like guardrails and effort, right? It doesn't happen on accident, and I'm sure you all do many podcasts on that. But I would say I was even just reflecting this morning before joining you all. My From 5 a.m. to 10 a.m., I'm working with my AI agent, right? You're the first humans I've talked to today in 5 hours, which is a little bit jarring, if I'm honest. But I was reflecting on how kind of the speed with which I can work, the speed with which I can glean insights or make connections in data that I was never able to make before. So in those kind of basic and obvious ways that I think everyone is using AI now, absolutely. I think in my own personal use, right, my AI understands that I'm low vision. It understands my cognitive preferences. It understands when I'm getting overloaded or when I'm lost on a tangent, right? And so it begins to learn things that really blend the line between accessibility and personalization in a way that I think will open up access and accessibility to people who never knew that they needed it, right? And then I think I'm just interested to see where that goes, right? And there, again, all kinds of considerations like privacy and trust that are incredibly important. And so it's not a tomorrow thing. But even in our own customizations and own use of AI, I think this is already happening just because we're human and we're interacting with something that by design wants to learn about us and help us. And so I'm seeing that. And then I think that there's a really interesting, I would say for us, and just kind of one example that's coming to mind, there's the ability to get information, kind of inaccurate information in real time in a way that's relevant to folks. And so if you're really engaging with AI in a work context as your teammate, for example, and you're struggling with something, maybe you do have one of those temporary injuries and you're needing something like, oh, I can't type. I could type on Friday. I broke my arm over the weekend. I can't type today. What are my options, right? You can engage with AI as long as it's got the right source of truth, as long as it's got the right guardrails, right? And you can learn things that are just, you don't know the word accommodation or adjustment. You don't know the word disability. That world is not familiar. You don't know assistive technology, but you suddenly have a tool where before maybe you had to go on a leave because you just didn't know and you didn't ask the right set of questions to the right person. And so that's where I think, just from kind of how, again, we're blurring lines, like I think it will take away kind of some of the burden of needing to know what you don't know in order to benefit from accessibility, assistive technology, and accommodations.
That's super interesting. And I know we've had some conversation prior to you coming on about where AI is going, the blurring of the lines with assistive tech and so on. And you earlier said, that you want to be solving the problems of the future, looking forwards instead of looking back. I think, you're spending a lot of time in the console. So where do you think, maybe looking at screen readers as an example rather than some of the other assistive technologies, where do you think that's going to develop? Do you think that people will spend less time using the screen reader, or they're just sort of solely focusing on using the screen reader with the AI, and the AI is doing a lot of the other interactions with a lot of the other applications, because you can use your AI to interface with lots of different other technologies. So you're in the workplace, you're using your AI, you can stay in the AI. You don't have to go into the spreadsheet, or you don't have to go into the Word document. You don't have to go to your emails and so on. Whereas before, you'd be using your assistive tech and switching between all of those things. Do you think that's going to change, the way that people are using things, because you're already doing that to a certain extent, but also change how people perceive AIs and when assistive tech, and whether or not some disabilities will require specialist assistive techs in the future?
Yeah, I've enjoyed these conversations with you when we've had them. I don't know that any of us hold a crystal ball right now. I think I have a strong point of view on this. What I don't have a strong point of view on is the time horizon. And so I think it's important to say first that, like, the way that we think about accessibility today must still exist for the foreseeable future, right? It matters when someone engages with a device or with a website or a mobile app or your learning content or your email, that it works for them and their assistive technology. That matters a lot, because we are not in a one console world yet. I think we'll get there one day, or at least the people who want to be there can be there one day. I don't know how long that horizon is, and I don't know if it's from 0 to 100 or 0 to 70, but I do know that it's not tomorrow. And so the way that we think about accessibility today has to still exist. I also know that accessible code leads to better AI outcomes, right? And so the things that will hold true, whether it's a human consuming them, right? I'm going to get the poor from WCAG wrong, but I'm going to just mess up all my words. The POUR, perceiver, I can't
I'll do it for you. Perceivable, operable, understandable, robust.
Thank you.
Boom.
Those matter to a human engaging with assistive technology. They also matter to your AI, right? Like, your AI is going to be able to extract richer insights, more accurate information. And so I think it remains to be seen, like, is 2.3.1.2.2 still incredibly powerful? Maybe. But are the overarching principles still relevant? Yes, I think so. To your point of, if we live in a world in a console, what matters most? And I think there it will be interesting what the community thinks about personalization and how much your AI is picking up on these things about you and what inferences it's making. And I think that's a to be determined. But I land on the side of, like, learn everything you want about me, please. Like, be me, right? Like, I want a digital twin. I want to, like, really lean in where other people don't have that same kind of trust and openness or desire. And so I think there's going to be a long time where it's kind of a customization of how much do I want to dial up what AIs can learn about me, therefore adapt to me. How much do I not want to? And I want to still use these kind of static, local, highly secure, highly private interactions. And I think it's to be seen. Your point, I think your last point around it gets into, I think, again, something that you might have a ton of podcast content on, around just what will the nature of disability, the nature of assistive technology, is it sitting on my device or is it implanted in my brain? Is it, right? Like, I think that is just a world that is, I'm excited to have those conversations. And I'm super hopeful that forums like this continue those conversations and push those conversations.
I would say over the last 18 months, there have been at least 2 books about the quality of the web, and now the quality of the web is been going down as it used to be. So things are getting worse, more confused. Now with AI, we see slop everywhere. My question is, when you want to express yourself as an individual outside work using technology that's available for you, do you feel that you can do it? How do you feel that you can do it? Do you feel comfortable in doing with the tools that we have, or you feel more barriers, more stress, more anxiety in order to be able to have a voice in the current times that we are facing now?
Sorry, Antonio, I missed the, like, first core concept that you.
So there's 2 books published in the last 18 months that say that the web is getting worse.
The web. Okay.
So when you want to express yourself in social networks or blogging, do you feel that you are in a good place, or you are struggling more in order to be able to participate like you did 5 years ago, for say?
That's an interesting question. You'll have to send me those books offline. I think for me personally, I I think for me personally, the way if I think of a one-way engagement, me out into the world, I feel like the tools around me help, right? And so a couple of examples, I might have, this is going to be a very basic personal example, but I might have a photo of my daughter that I want to post, and I love Taylor Swift. And so I want to find the best Taylor Swift lyric to exemplify my daughter dancing in her first dance recital, right? And so I can use AI to more authentically be me in less time and with less cognitive effort, right? So super simple thing. I can also use Be My Eyes AI to generate an audio description of that image so that I'm posting that for my friends who use screen readers. And so in those ways, right, like my authentic personal lived experience kind of one way gets to be more accessible and more authentic and faster. And so I think in that way, that's working. I would say, I think you made the point around AI slop and just kind of this notion of what's real and what isn't is becoming more elusive. And so I'd love to read those books. It is a challenging thing. And even one of the things I'm learning just kind of in my personal use with AI is, I think the change curve is really interesting. There's a period of time where you're like, oh, awesome. It took all my words and made them sound better. Then there's a period of time where you say, okay, let me give it less and let it extrapolate, right? That's kind of the productivity hack. Like there's a maybe just time hack. And then there's I didn't have to write all those words in the first place. Now I can write less and it does more. And then you're in this blissful area of oh, AI is amazing. And then you really inspect, right? Like, wait, where did that sentence come from? Or, hey, someone asserted that was true, but it wasn't true. Or that's a different context, or. And so the way I engage with AI now, kind of in my, day to day, whether it's ChatGPT as I'm trying to diagnose whatever skin rash my daughter might have, or, in kind of researching topics for work or whatever it might be, I kind of go back to this teammate concept of I'm not outsourcing to it. I'm engaging with it. I'm teaching it. I'm questioning it. I'm again, able to look all the way around a problem that I could only see in 2D before, but I'm not outsourcing the judgment and the thinking in a way that I probably did for a week or two when I was like, this is amazing, right? Thankfully, that was some time ago, but it's just this really, I think, interesting way to, again, look around a problem that has felt unattainable or inaccessible before. And I think that's kind of taking that to the meta level of if we can kind of collectively get there so that we're not publishing as much slop because it is everywhere and able to curate our context and our bar and our guardrails a bit more, then I think it's a more informed on both slop might come out, but it can't come in, right? And so I'm interested in kind of that, right? Like how do I put up my own controls while also hoping and trusting that others are putting up their controls? But it's, I have more accountability and autonomy in what comes to me. I think that direction is possible.
That's super interesting. Finding the ways to sift the signal from the noise is ever more important in a world where there's ever more information and working out ways to verify it. So, Megan, we've reached the end of our allotted time. It flies by when you've got three people asking you questions. Thank you so much for being our guest today. Thanks to Amazon for helping support us and keeping us on air. And we really look forward to sharing this episode with our audience. If you're a member of our audience and you like this show, please think about subscribing to the podcast because everyone that subscribed helps get this message further.
Thanks, everyone.